I'm saying next time, bring the evidence. All you do, you come here, corruption.
How come
Just here. Next time you come, bring your stuff. I am not talking about that. I'm talking about you in 2024, December, saying there's corruption. Bring it.
Let me ask you this question. I would like to ask the AG to propose legislation for what we call small claims court. There are lots of poor people, to an example you just gave, that they have issues with others and sometimes with large firms, but the lawyer fee is greater than the fee you're claiming.
It is their
right.
Unlike the right that someone has, all our rights exist in context.
What's the context for second medical opinion?
Because you're disrespecting the process.
No.
Jesus, this is common sense, man.
Any situation which you seem to do, you're just dealing with Afro-Guyanese issues. If one, you can't bring and pull the leaders of the African community together, you're failing. And if two, you can't put forward a future, a blueprint, and a plan for African Guyanese, you're failing as well.
Pleasant Wednesday evening to you. This is the Freddie Kissoon Show. I wanted our guest to be the first interview program for 2026. So I said to him, I'm giving you a fait accompli, the French word meaning you have no scope for saying no. And knowing him and our long relationship, he said yes. So I'm glad he is our first guest for 2026. There are three persons who are genuinely regarded inside and outside of Guyana as the PPP. They are the PPP are they. And that is Dr. Mohamed Irfan Ali, the President of Guyana, the Vice President, Barajag Dio, and the Attorney General, Anil Nandlall. Before we get into the interview, I'd like to remind our viewers, what I said 3.5 years ago when I started this program. I want to leave facts that when the history of Guyana is being written, when our history is being written, these programs would be put in the hands of the researchers. And based on that, I'd like to give to you, our viewers, a very piece of important fact that will remain forever in our history. On the Saturday of the Monday of the 2020 election, on that Saturday, GCOM had decided that they would declare the election results and Mr. Granger would be sworn in. That's the Saturday of the Monday. The day before the Saturday, the Friday, Anil Nandlall got an injunction from the court stopping GCOM from declaring the election results. When it was time for the declaration, the chairman of GCOM, Claude Singh, said, I'm an officer of the court. I cannot de-recognize a court order. That was the beginning of the end of the people who wanted to stay in power in 2020. That amazing, that perhaps beautiful fact we owe to Anil Nandlall. The PPP leadership and democracy in Guyana owe Anil Nandlall an unpayable debt. If it wasn't for that Friday afternoon and the securing of that injunction by Anil Nandlall, I would not have been here. Anil Nandlall would not have been here. I don't know where Guyana would have been. I hope these few words get into our history books. With that in mind, I would now like to introduce you on behalf of my co-host, the Attorney General, Minister of Legal Affairs, and one of the long-standing leaders of the PPP, the Honorable Anil Nandlall. Thanks for being here, Protocol. You can stretch over there. You're tall enough to shake your hand. I want to start with 2025, and I'd like to have your thoughts because, as I said before, these things go into the history books. What are your thoughts on what happened with the PNC, 12 seats, and the acquisition of 15 seats by Win. What happened in that election to cause that kind of twisted results?
So Freddie and Leonard, thank you very much for inviting me to be part of your program. And let me apologize in advance for the many invitations that were extended to me, which I did not get an opportunity to accept and be part of previous discussions. I want to also register my gratitude for the very flattering opening remarks that you have made. And I
It's factual.
And I want to congratulate the both of you for doing a remarkable job in this program. You don't have an idea how many people look at this program, they look forward to this program, they respect your analysis, and they are guided by the many schools of thought expressed on this program. And I speak not only in relation to the viewing public in Guyana, but right across the Guyanese diaspora. So please continue this job, and I wish you all the best going forward. So 2025, and how do I account for essentially election results? Let's begin with the PNC, as you have identified them as the main architect to which I must speak. So I have said from 2020 onwards, repeatedly, and the public record will support my contentions, that unless the PNC accepts their role in rigging elections, their role in attempting to rig the 2020 elections, unless they abandon the incredulous and incredible story that they were the victim of fraud, unless they accept the results of those elections as being free and fair, unless they stop peddling an absolutely ridiculous narrative that the government is pursuing policies of discrimination. For example, publishing in the parliament and elsewhere that the cash grant that we are giving to children are only being given to East Indian children, when the thing is done in accordance with the school register, when 90% of the staff of the Ministry of Education who administers the program are Afro-Guyanese, and yet they go out and say to the public that the grant is only targeted to Indo-Guyanese children, unless they stop doing things like telling Afro-Guyanese communities that they must not sign up for the Gold Scholarship, to almost plead with parents to break that kind of diabolical narrative and propaganda they were spreading in those communities, that only Indian children are going to benefit from the Gold Scholarship and that Afro-Guyanese students must not apply for it, unless they distance themselves from political destructive elements such as David Hines, who beat that war drum of racism 4 or 5 times per week, unless they distance themselves from people like Rickford Burke and those who spew hatred and division among our people, then they would be decimated at the polls. I have a long litany of public statements to this effect, calling upon them to move away from those postures and those public postulations. They ignored them. In fact, they embraced those very things. They embraced the David Hines. They continue to speak about this narrative with even greater confidence and greater purported veracity. These things about the PPP are trying to rig the elections. They became an absolutely irrelevant and incredulous political force They underestimated the intellect of the Guyanese electorate. They underestimated the exposure to which Guyanese currently enjoy. They relied absolutely on race and on their traditional base, hoping that race will triumph over reason. And throughout that period, the PPP was speaking a message of unity. The PPP took active and decisive steps to embrace a wider electorate. The PPP took active steps to dismantle institutional rumors that it had a bogeyman at Freedom House that would harm Afro-Guyanese if they go up to a particular floor in the building. These racial myths that were perpetuated for decades, the PPP leadership took a decisive position that we are going to actively work to dismantle these things. And we open our folds and we embrace a policy of national reconciliation, national unity. And we brought all the people together. We began the conversation and we followed it up by actions. We went into the non-traditional PPP communities. We sat with the people and we spoke with them in confidence. We spoke with them earnestly and honestly. And we started to work towards uniting. We started to work towards national unity. From the beginning to the end of my campaign during the 2025 elections, I publicly appealed in every single one of my public speeches. I publicly appealed for the electorate at the 2025 elections to break the chains of racial voting, break the backbone of divisive politics, and let us vote in unity, vote on issues, vote on policies, vote on programs. And in my respectful view, we were successful because we were able to make inroads, significant inroads in non-traditional areas. So much so, I said repeatedly that we would be vindicated and we would be adjudged whether we are wrong, whether we are successful or not in our work towards national unity if we are able to win the RDC of region number 4. I said that will be undisputed evidence that we have succeeded and that we have been able to move Guyana away from the backward politics of racial and ethnic polarization. And the results proved us right. So that is how I would account for the demise of the PNC. And that's how they lost. They moved from 31 seats to 12 seats. Now, the Win Party, in my respectful view, came in at an appropriate period in Guyana's history. Now, moving a bloc, an ethnic voting bloc, from one extreme to another is decades old, built on hereditary characteristics, built on family orientation, built on culture, built on a number of powerful, cohesive factors that shape the human mind. Is not an easy thing to do in one swoop. And while we succeeded tremendously, you had some who they couldn't find, after the arguments were put out, and they are intelligent people, they're educated people, they saw the PNC as not a valid option anymore. Because we were able to degut the PNC. We were able to show that they are not a viable force. Intellectually, they are not superior. They have not articulated a vision. the party itself was imploding. The right messages were not being sent. Even those within the hierarchy of the PNC were sending wrong signals. There was a great decline in confidence in the leadership of the party. The energy of the party was sapped as a result of internal conflicts and configurations. So all of that dented the PNC as an attractive political movement. And while we were able to shift some across the PPP, a lot were left there. And when political party became the beneficiary of a lot of our hard work, as well as the same time of the beneficiary of the unfolding or the collapse of the PNC. And a large movement of people went into that direction. And then, of course, Mr. Mohamed has his own unique way, to campaign. Political parties in Guyana have never used money as campaigning, as a campaigning tool. Yes, you use finance in having elaborate campaigns, mass rallies, a lot of posters, a lot of flags. You expend money in that regard. Political parties in Guyana and the Caribbean or the Commonwealth have never actually attempted to what can be considered as financial bribery to get votes. WIN openly did that, in particular in the Amerindian communities. WIN, for example, imported thousands of cell phones and distributed among the Amerindian communities. You have images of him sharing out $5,000 bills and thick wads of money in communities. And he did that throughout the country. No other political party has ever done that. And we have a population now, a floating population of about 20% of the overall population that fall prey to these things. The quick fix kind of thing. You had that. Mohamed had that. And Mohamed was able to create this allure, right? You know, this movie star kind of glamour. And young people are attracted to that. So that was another motivating factor. And then he did a lot of work. The family did a lot of work in charitable work in the community. So he took advantage of all these little things. And I believe that accounted for his rise and the successes that he achieved. It certainly was not based on policies, because none was articulated. It certainly was not done on charismatic wooing of the voters, to which we are traditionally accustomed in contemporary Guyanese and Commonwealth politics. You didn't have a leader who is charismatic and elegant and eloquent in his exhortation to the voting public. You didn't have a team. There was not even a list that was showcased. You didn't even have a prime ministerial candidate up to the few days before the elections. Then in addition to that, you never had a person vying for government who was indicted for a series, well, at that time, likely to be indicted and likely to be extradited to the US on a number of serious criminal charges. You never had a person who was the subject of international OFAC sanctions. And despite all of that, he benefited from an existing state of affairs caused by the different precipitating factors to which I alluded. Whether that can be sustained is a completely different matter. I don't know. But in my respectful view, there doesn't exist at this stage the structures, the type of discipline, the mobilization tools, that are required to sustain a movement for any elongated period of time. All of those are absent in this thing called the win. They don't even have a party structure. Right? They have a general secretary. They don't know how they reach. Why they have a general secretary? They have a general secretary because the PNC has a general secretary and the PVP has a general secretary. They don't understand the origin of a general secretary. They don't know what the role of a general secretary is. They don't have a party constitution. They have nothing. It was an ad hoc movement that benefited from a serendipity of circumstances. And that's how I will characterize the success or the performance of the Win party.
In your last response, you did mention in passing that the Win main candidate was likely to be extradited at that time.
Yeah.
And now there are extradition proceedings going on.
Yeah.
And I saw maybe a day or two ago that there is accusation made against the government, and I think something was filed in the court saying that the government, being a political opponent, is biased, and because of the level of bias, and which would now be intrinsic in the process, all the people who handle the documents are biased. Therefore, Mohamed is not extraditable. How do you respond to that?
I'm happy that you have raised that question because it's out there and there is an action file to that effect. The affidavit is 107 paragraphs in which they detail these allegations. They detail excerpts of the vice president's press conferences and what he says, what he said of Azruddin Mohamed. They detail what I said of Azruddin Mohamed during the elections campaign. They detail what the president said. They detail what the Minister of Home Affairs said on the political campaign trail. Now, it is an undisputed fact of public notoriety that long before the election's date was fixed, it was in the public domain that they were likely to be extradited. And you can go and look at the newspapers' articles to that effect. The OFAC sanctions came since 2024 June. At that time, election was not fixed. We knew that we constitutionally were going to an election in 2025, but there was no proximate date or anything like that. When the OFAC sanctions were imposed, what was the status of the Mohamed family? By their own public admissions, they were supporters of the People's Progressive Party. In fact, the father was an elected councillor of an NDC on a PPP ticket. So that was their status. PPP supporters by their own admissions. In fact, they have gone as far as saying that they are financiers or were financiers of the PPP. So on the political divide, they were with the PPP. After the sanctions came, the government made a public statement or a series of public statements to say that the duty of the government is to protect the financial systems of Guyana and to protect Guyana from the consequences of these sanctions. The consequences of these sanctions are severe and they are listed in the sanctions themselves. One can only turn to Venezuela to look at the sanctions and the repercussions. And we began a process of disengagement as a government with the Mohammeds. They had relationships at the Gold Board, at the GGMC. They had contracts with the government. They had a license to operate a cambio under the central bank and other relationships. The government publicly stated that these relationships will have to be severed, and there were engagements to do so as seamlessly as possible. I believe that the Mohammeds felt, and they do feel, slighted that the PPP, their being supporters, should have defended them and stood with them, I suppose, at the expense of the national interest. We will never do such a thing. And we made that very clear. The investigations into the Mohammeds from the public records of the US began as early as 2009. Right? We're talking about 2025 elections. Raphael Trotman, the former Minister of Natural Resources, recently came on the public record and said as minister in 2015, he was informed by the US government that these people were under investigation. He made a statement to contradict GHK Lal, who was then the chairman of the Gold Board, who said he was unaware. And Trotman said that he could not have been unaware because Trotman as the minister received it and passed it down to the Gold Board. Right? These when you look at the offenses for which they are charged, the offenses have particulars. They deal with transactions. These transactions start from 2017, long before we got into government. And they go as late as 2024. Right? The point I am making is that this request comes from America, not from Guyana. All of these things happened long before we got into government. Fast forward to June 2025, when the election campaign was heating up. After the election date was announced, and I believe Parliament would have been dissolved, the Mohammeds made a decision to enter politics. Freddie used the word a fait accompli at the beginning of the program. It was already a fait accompli that they would be that they would be the subject of an extradition request. The sanctions had already been imposed. The point is, they were armed with the knowledge of an impending extradition request. They entered the political realm, knowing that what do you expect will happen during the election campaign when you are my opponent? Democracy promotes healthy competition for the votes. You think you are a political opponent and we will put you up as the Pope? We are going to throw every available thing that we have at you. We are going to speak about its sanctions. We are going to speak about your indictment in America. We are going to speak about your criminal record and your criminal antecedents. That's fair play in politics. And he did the same to us. Fast forward now to be winning the government. And I believe he did that because he wants to get some benefit from being in politics in relation to the extradition. Fast forward, the extradition request came. And now extradition by its very nature is an act between two governments. It's an act between two executives. A government can delegate responsibilities under extradition law. A treaty is between two countries. The government of the country and the government of the other countries are the two main players in executing the treaty obligations. So when an extradition request comes, a government can divest itself of its obligations. So naturally the government has to act. And as I pointed out last night, no one can point to a documented instance of a request for extradition emanating from the United States of America in independent Guyana and a government saying no. A government not acceding to the request. So what this government did was consistent with what every government would have done and consistent with our public posture on these matters, which is to stand on the side of international law, stand on the side of obeisance to treaty obligations, and stand on the side of the world in the battle against organized crime. That's Guyana's international position. We are going to change that because a request comes in relation to the Mohammeds. We are not going to do that. If the theory of Mohammed's case is right, then all a person has to do who is likely to be the subject of an extradition request or is the subject of an extradition request to defeat that request, enter into politics, and then says, oh, the government is my political rival, and therefore they are automatically biased. And that bias disqualifies them from extraditing me. If that is taken to its logical conclusion, then politics becomes a safe refuge for criminals to evade the arms of justice of another country. Right? So that's how I'll answer that question. It can't have merit. If that argument has merit, then the law of extradition will collapse.
A follow-up on the extradition thing. Why must Guyana obey? Or why is Guyana under a law created between UK and the US? And it is the foundation upon which the I forget the name of the Fugitive Offenders Act. Why is that so?
Almost every country in the world, Leonard, is the subject of an extradition treaty. That's international law. The Vienna Convention and a whole host of international instruments. The first extradition case took place 400 BC. Extradition is not a new thing. The Pharaoh of Egypt was the first government that made an extradition request. Extradition law is centuries old, and these treaties exist for centuries. That is how the Committee of Nations evolved. It's part of international cooperation. It's part of international law. It's part of a network that protects the world against organized crime, and it is centuries old. Now, the question you should ask me is why we have not updated the treaty. Because we are using a treaty that was entered into between Great Britain and the US in 1931. At one point in time, the question was whether that treaty is still in force. And that was adjudicated upon by our Court of Appeal. Chancellor George, current Chancellor George, her father was the Chancellor, and he was a great judge. And the lawyers involved also did a lot of research. And they were able to produce to the court letters by Prime Minister, Premier Forbes Burnham at the time. We had just become independent. And Burnham wrote to the United Nations Secretary General to say that Guyana will continue to be governed by and bound by all international agreements and treaties that had been entered into by Great Britain during colonial rule, and to which British Guyana was subject, right? And we continue that tradition up to now. Perhaps we should negotiate a new treaty But nothing is wrong with the treaty that we have. Many countries are in our position, they're still using that 1931 treaty. That 1931 treaty was not in relation to Guyana alone. It was in relation to the British Commonwealth in 1931. And countries have moved beyond that and after independence, negotiate different treaties. But there's nothing legally wrong. But that's the historical evolution of how we arrived at where we are now in relation to the 1931 treaty.
The president made reference to something that I'd like to hear your thoughts on. As a student of politics and philosophy, I find this thing obnoxious, and I'd like to have your views on it. And I have the support of the former president of Trinidad, Rowley, in which, in a moment of paroxysm of rage, he said, "We must get out. Trinidad must get out of the Privy Council." As one of, in my opinion, I taught you at Eugene. I think you're one of the most erudite lawyers this country produced, and the Caribbean produced. I don't flatter people, but from the time I saw you in tutorial at UG, I know you would have made a name for yourself, and I've written that several times. I'd like to have your deep thoughts as to why the CARICOM nations, with the exception of 3 or 4, are still part of the Privy Council. It's just for a post-colonial Caribbean man, AG. It grates my nerves.
Freddie, it is a question that I have, well, rather, it is an issue that I have taken the opportunity to speak on whenever I travel in the Caribbean and the occasion presents itself. And my consistent call has been for the rest of the Caribbean to thank the Privy Council for the remarkable service that they have rendered to the Caribbean for several centuries as a final court, and to be part of the Caribbean Court of Justice. You spoke in your opening remarks about an order that was obtained the day before the declarations were being, in fact, the declarations were already made by Mingo when that order was obtained. And that order stopped DECOM from acting on the declaration, right? That case went, the essence of that case went all the way to the Caribbean Court of Justice. And if it was not for the Caribbean Court of Justice, I don't know where Guyana would have been today. Because the Court of Appeal of Guyana overruled all the decisions made in the High Court. The High Court made decisions in favor of the PPP. Let me put it that way, because we were the party, the litigant. And when we went to the court, we lost all. Imagine if that was the final court, and we could not have gone anywhere, where Guyana would have been today. Dr. Fenton Ramsahoi, whose photograph is on the wall there as Guyana's the first Guyanese Attorney General of the colony of British Guyana. Before that, we had British acting in that capacity or performing the functions of Attorney General of the colony. Fenton Ramsahoi said to me that when Burnham abolished appeals to the Privy Council in 1970, shortly after we became republic, he condemned Guyana to 100 years of backwardness. Right? Fenton Ramsahoi packed his bag and he left this country to go and live permanently in the Caribbean. In 2020, we would have celebrated about 50 of that 100 years. And had it not been for the CCJ that overturned decisions of the Guyana Court of Appeal we would have been condemned to the other 50 years. Right? The Privy Council there being a court external of Guyana. The CCJ has replaced that. And the CCJ can showcase Guyana as its selling point. And the CCJ has ruled repeatedly in Guyana, Guyanese cases, against this government, against the previous government, or previous governments, upholding constitutional principles. And its decision can withstand scrutiny anywhere. The Privy Council has dealt with cross-dressing being unconstitutional. It has knocked down powers that the DPP has been exercising since independence as being unconstitutional. The point I am making is that one can't cite partisanship in the rulings coming out of the CCJ. There is a philosophy that guides those rulings. And it's a philosophy.
Just now you made a mistake. It's the CCJ that ruled that cross-dressing is unconstitutional.
Yes, what I said.
Yeah, the Privy Council.
Sorry, the CCJ. Yeah. The CCJ, right? And the CCJ knocked down the DPP powers. In the Bisram case, an extradited matter.
It said she couldn't direct the magistrate.
That's correct. And the CCJ has removed a saving clause. Let me explain. It's a little complicated. In the constitution of every Caribbean country, there's a saving clause. The saving clause says that all the laws that were part of the colonial empire are going to be saved. The Constitution is the supreme law, and every future law must comply with the Constitution, must be consistent with the Constitution, must not conflict with the Constitution, save and except those laws that were there before. In other words, you have some unconstitutional law that were locked off. They were pre-constitutional law, pre-independence law. In colonial, they are locked off by the saving clause. The CCJ broke that lock. And that is why that provision that is 40 or 50 years old with the DPP was broken by the CCJ. It penetrated that law because it says that you can't lock a nation's law in a time capsule and keep it there, and irrespective of how draconian it is, how outmoded it is, there is a provision, there is a bolt that bolts off any inquiry into them for the purpose of knocking them down. And that's where the cross-dressing law was secured by. That's why it was never knocked down before. The CCJ ripped it apart. Now, that's a progressive approach. The Privy Council has not done that yet. In those countries that are governed by the Privy Council, and the Privy Council had recently had an opportunity to review this position. And it looked at what the CCJ did, and it says, we are not going to do that. We are not going to do that. All right? Now, the CCJ is not perfect. They have made pronouncements that I have some problems with. But they are organic, they are indigenous, they understand our culture, they can relate directly to the people. You see, law has to be administered in the environment that creates it. Law has to govern the people with some degree of familiarity, or else the law will become sterile. And you have the Privy Council that is so many miles away in a distant place. They have really no engagement with the people of the Caribbean, and they are still determined. They are one arm of government. governing the Caribbean 50 years after independence. That can be a progressive position by any standard.
You're quite you're quite an influential person as an AG. Have you ever had a quiet moment with some of your counterparts and say, man,
I do it.
Come on to this thing.
I do it all the time. Yesterday, I was speaking to the lawyers appearing for the U.S. interest, the Jamaicans, and I was having that discussion with them. Quite recently, a couple of months ago, I was in Trinidad on a radio program, and I made a public appeal. Because, strangely, Trinidad houses the court. Trinidad was the main architect for the establishment of the court. And then when the court came, Trinidad backed off. The government changed. And then even subsequent government, because two governments have been alternating in Trinidad, the PNM and the UNC. And both have refused. And it would be a tragedy if the CCJ is to collapse, you know. And I am hoping that the Caribbean would lend their support. I mean, many countries have since joined: Barbados, Belize, Guyana, of course, and I think
one of the small
islands. But we need everybody to be on board. We really need everybody.
You think you're going to keep trying when you meet the Jamaican AG, man? This thing is disgraceful. It is.
No, I whatever little I can do, I will continue to do. And President Ali, to his credit, has been leading this advocacy as well at the heads of government. And if you recall, when he administered the oath to Justice Arif Bulkan, the latest addition to the Caribbean Court of Justice, he sent a not so subtle message to the Caribbean to say that the CCJ has a ready home in Guyana if the occasion arises, right? So we are hoping that the CCJ is here to stay, because the CCJ is a welcome addition to our judicial hierarchical structure. And we needed that, and the value of it has already been established beyond doubt, and it is immeasurable.
The operator said we have 10 minutes more, so what about if we switch 180 degrees into things that are not as ponderous as what we've been discussing?
You're the host, you're the program.
How is the family?
The family is fine. My son is, and if I say so myself, with all the bias and prejudices, Avian Vihas Mohabir Nandlall. Very handsome young man. I love him dearly. I never thought that I would love another human being so much until he was born.
Parents are crazy for their kids.
Yeah, the other day he fell down, and I wish if I fell down instead of him. Scratch his nose.
Can I be absurd and publicly announce that the family may be enlarged soon?
Well, I don't think you need to announce that. The mother took the liberty of taking out a photograph, and in her hand, she put the printout of the embryo. You know, you get that. No, it's a boy.
The boy again.
That's a boy.
Of course, you're going to keep trying till you get the girl. Large families are happy families.
Well, that's a consensual matter with another party.
Yeah.
And I need to consult before I.
You have a name already?
No, I don't have a name as yet.
Since you're on light thing, do you prefer bowling or batting?
Batting. But I do like to bowl, because I bowl like spin.
If you're the batsman and the president is the bowler, 8 runs to go, last over, who wins the game?
If you get stuck there, you don't normally get stuck.
No, it depends. It depends on whether I'm able to demolish the bowling. I don't think the status of the bowler will affect my ability. The quality of the ball, maybe. Okay. The quality of the bowling.
So the president's team will win?
Not necessarily. If the president team bowls well, they will win. if my
President
team...
is the bowler and you're the batsman.
Yeah, but I don't think the president would impose his presidentialism on a cricket match.
What do you do? The AG's job is very, very fun. You may be in court every day now with this thing. What do you do apart from being an obsessed father? What do you go out to the movies? When last you had a cafe eating?
So, Freddie, the life of a politician in Guyana is rough. We don't stop working in the PVP, as you would see. Our ministers, and the president is out there. And I tell people that, you know, Chelly Jagan was a great politician, but he lived in a particular age. Jagan never had a cell phone. Jagan did not have to deal with Facebook. He didn't have to deal with WhatsApp and all these things.
He didn't have to deal with work.
He didn't have to deal with all these things. The modern politician has to deal with all these things. And you have an extremely demanding electorate and constituency. And one that is reminding you how competitive it is and threatens you on a regular basis to go and vote for this one or go and call this one to do an interview. So you are actively involved in the streets, in the communities, to do political work on the weekend. From a social life, fortunately for me, Freddie, I have socialized a lot. And those who know me and looking at the program would know. I have had my fair share of those excursions to which you are referring. So I don't do it anymore, at least not with great regularity. And the important thing is that there's no urge in me to do that kind of thing anymore. I think I've exhausted that part of my life. I had enough of that. And now is to concentrate the little time that I get. Because remember, you have social political activities, social government activities. The president has functions on a regular basis. You have embassies that have functions. You have to go as part of your responsibilities. You have many, many functions of the government that you are required to attend. The little time that you get, you try to read law. You can't stop reading law. And you split that with your family. It's a very boring existence.
We're going to come back to the likeness because I'm watching at something Burnham and Jagan didn't have access to that you have. But I'm going to tell the viewers what is that. Which piece of legislation you think that was in your heart, in your mind, and that's the one that is closer to your heart, that you have achieved?
That's really difficult because there are several. The one, for example, simple. The simple ones are the most important ones. For example, the one that allows the unmarried woman to apply for letters of administration. She had all the rights that a married woman would have had if she had lived with the man continuously for 5 years prior to his death, except that she couldn't apply for letters of administration for his estate. She was entitled during his lifetime to half of his property, but entitled to zero if he died. And that was a great lacuna in the law, which I was able to bridge. That has empowered thousands of women, tens of thousands of women. Another little piece of legislation, amendment that we did to impact positively the lives of people, is if you die, you had to get letters of administration to withdraw your money from the bank. And that letters of administration will cost you a lot of money. It would take a long time. You got to do the funeral. The family don't have any money. The money is in the bank, but the bank will not release the money. Or you may be owed by your employers. You may be entitled to some kind of insurance, but nobody will pay you unless you get this letters of administration. We changed the law to allow you to get X amount of money, and then you apply after that. That has impacted positively the lives of thousands of poor people.
Two quick questions along the same line, which has to do with bail. I raised it on one of our programs the other day. I go to the police station, I'm charged, I pay bail, $40,000.
Mhm.
I go to the magistrate, she reduces the bail to 30,000. But I got to find that bail and I'm kept in custody for a bail that is lower than the police bail, which is the state bail. Can't we have a reform that says bail is transferable and police bail is transferable to court bail and court bail is transferable to fine? Is that possible?
All right. So that's a neat, very nice question. So first of all, let me just explain that when you go to the police and they grant you bail, that bail is to ensure that you appear in the court.
Yeah.
When you go to the magistrate and you are granted bail, that is to ensure that you return to court on the next date to go to trial. So it's a different bail. It's not the same bail,
Understood.
right? Practically now, you were supposed to be able to take that bail receipt that you would have received at the police station right there to the policeman sitting there, and he supposed to have signed at the back, and you could have gone and then cashed that bail. But you're asking a very important question. Why, if it is the same system, the money is going in the same account, why the bail is not credited, right? The legislation currently does not permit that, but I am currently reviewing the Bail Act. The judiciary has identified certain things and they want me to correct, and that's something I certainly will consider. And these are the things, Freddie, that I like. In this program and in all programs of this type, I want the input from the public. You see, the law is intended to regulate people. And it is important that the people themselves have a say in the laws that we are passing. Now, when I do consultations, it's sometimes very difficult to get consultations to the people who really matters. I do consultation organizationally, so you get a number of organizations that come. But the man who is directly affected, for whatever reason, he doesn't come forward. I don't get his views. But you have that opportunity, you speak to people, and if you can channel those things to me, right? And I like that engagement.
I want to come that, I want to be certain you speak to people. I live a very simple life, so I go in the supermarket.
Yes, I know. I read all your articles.
And I tell you this, from my praxis, my activism out there is a general perception, very pervasive, very ubiquitous, that you're the next presidential contender. Are you preparing yourself for that, or it's too daunting what it will involve? But generally, people see you. I'm out there. It's you, Barra Jagdeo, and the president, and when people talk with the PPP. Do you think you're up to it? It's going to be
one thing at a time. I've already contested elections internally in the People's Progressive Party for that post, the post of presidential candidate. So that answers the question. But the thing is that it's all to be determined by the party at the appropriate time. You know, these parties have discipline.
I think you'll be a good president. And before Craig comes in, I'll be on 1 minute move. I've known you for so long, looking at your photograph, this is very personal. What secret formula you have? What are you drinking? What are you importing from Afghanistan? What herbs? You don't age.
No, I do age, but I don't know, water. The natural source of life.
For last minute, but I got two questions.
Yes.
Question one, I put all two together, you answer them in one. Question one is access to justice. Sometimes people, small people, are not able to access justice. For example, a civil court, like a small claim court. Somebody owe you a $300,000 or you go just to talk to the lawyer. You might got pay $10,000 and people turn away. Can't we have a small claims court where people could ordinarily just go access the court without all the large formalities? That's one. And two, it is extremely difficult to discipline lawyers in Guyana. And Freddie said we walk the road every day. And that is a complaint that we get consistently. That I pay this lawyer to do this, they didn't do that, they didn't give me a receipt and all those kinds of things.
Last night on Issues in the News, I spoke precisely on that point. Fortunately, the judiciary has taken the position that there must be legal reforms regarding the profession, the legal profession. I had a brief discussion with the president of the Bar Association last night, and he is in agreement. Like you, I walk the length and breadth of this country. I am the minister with responsibility for justice in the country. The complaints against the lawyers for alleged dishonesty, alleged negligence, alleged irresponsible engagements with clients are too numerous to ignore. Right? Too numerous to ignore. And I speak from the perspective of bettering the profession because I'm a member of the profession. The profession is a great profession. It's self-regulatory. That self-regulatory status carries with it responsibilities. You can't want to be self-regulate and then you create your own, you know. So we have to strengthen the accountability and transparency process. We have to strengthen the disciplinary process. We have to strengthen the type of remedies that an aggrieved party can receive. And we have to make the profession more responsible. And I don't believe that there is anyone out there, any lawyer out there, who can, in principle, justify an opposition to these reforms. As I said, the Bar Association supports it, and the judiciary supports it, and I support it. So we are moving in that direction.
The operator signal, can I make a request of you? I've known Fred a long time, and he said he likes politics, he's staying in politics. Can I ask you 5 years before, when your presidential candidate went out there, could you make him a campaign manager? Would you consider making him a campaign manager? Is there a possibility?
This is the end of the
Is there a possibility? Is there a possibility he would do good? He would do good in your campaign. He would do good in your campaign.
As the person, as the subject person, he says it's the end of the program.
Reggie, it's always nice talking to you.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure. Thank you very much.
This has been our first interview program, and it couldn't have been with a better person, based on my perception of politics, than Anil Nandlall, the Attorney General and one of the nicest politicians you can find anywhere in the world. And I say that unapologetically. We'll see you on Friday.